Chapter 2. What is Consciousness? Before we examine the nature and structure of human consciousness, I would like to define a few terms that I will be using in the discussion of this subject. They have been used so loosely and with so many different meanings that one can easily become confused. These terms have been used by so many different minds, different backgrounds and conditioning, that they are bound to have different meanings to you. Even in ordinary conversation, when one says something, one says it with one meaning. When it reaches the other person, he gives a different meaning to those same words. When this is the case with ordinary conversation, imagine the problem that arises when we discuss a subject as subtle as this. Understanding the meaning of these terms will enable us to avoid many problems arising from semantics and will enable the reader at once to clearly understand exactly what I will be explaining. The terms that I would like to define are consciousness, awareness, attention, subconsciousness, superconsciousness, unconsciousness, and psychic energy forces. These are all terms which I will be frequently using. Therefore, it will be useful to know what they mean. This will facilitate the transfer of a great deal of knowledge about the anatomy of human consciousness. I am using the word consciousness in a much larger sense than it is commonly used. Consciousness is the possibility, the potential to be conscious, the compulsion to be conscious. It is the everlasting experience of being conscious. It needs no fuel, it needs no rest. It is pure energy, perpetual internal energy. It is the totality of potential awareness, the capacity to be conscious. Consciousness is not merely the capacity to be conscious at a particular moment, but it also includes the potential and possibility to be conscious at any given moment throughout the entire domain of the time-space continuum. Consciousness includes potential to be conscious of the past as well as of the future. It even includes the capacity to be conscious of those experiences which occur outside of the time-space continuum. Consciousness, they say, is the totality of our capacity to have conscious experiences per se, whether we are immediately aware of it or not. Consciousness includes the conscious awareness of a contemporary experience, as well as the potential capacity to be aware of any experience, whether within the time-space complex or outside of it. On the other hand, awareness represents that region of consciousness of which we are conscious at any given time. Awareness is the present field of consciousness, what we are now, immediately, conscious of. It is our available consciousness. Out of the totality of consciousness, something is flowing through time into immediate consciousness, into awareness. This does not simply include that which is being perceived through the sensory system, what we are now seeing, hearing, tasting, and so on. It also includes the things you are not seeing or hearing, but have the potential to hear, see, and so on. Those things which you can become aware of whenever you want to, which are available in the same time frame. These belong to the scope and domain of awareness. Attention is a probe, a narrowed down beam of awareness, which is focused onto a particular area in the domain of the immediate conscious experiences available to us. Attention is that part of awareness within which we are moving around inside the domain of our possible experience in order to become more aware of a certain part of it, to give it a greater significance in consciousness, to become consciously aware of it. Therefore, attention is simply that part of awareness which we use to focus our consciousness upon something. For example, the whole room you are sitting in is a part of your awareness now. But your attention is on this book, this particular page and line, this particular word. Therefore, your attention is picking up only a part of the available awareness in the room in which you are sitting. You can pick up other parts also by shifting and manipulating your attention from one thing to another. Whenever the attention is shifted from one object to another, you will be picking up certain parts in your field of immediate awareness in order to have a closer look at them. Human attention is that faculty in consciousness which enables us to have this deeper experience of any part of the domain of our awareness. Human attention also performs another function in human consciousness. It enables us to become less aware of a certain part of our experience. It's a double-edged sword, which cuts both ways. It can increase your power to be conscious of a thing, and at the same time, it enables you to cut off the awareness of whatever you do not wish to experience. Later, you will see how this second feature of attention is even more important than the first. Subconsciousness is a storage area. It is that part of consciousness in which our memories are stored. It is that area of consciousness which lies outside the field of our immediate awareness. Subconsciousness is that part of consciousness of which we are unaware by virtue of forgetfulness, by virtue of the shutting down or inhibiting of the memory process. But it can be regained and brought back into the field of our immediate awareness when we turn on memory process. Unconsciousness is simply another name for subconsciousness. It is a more modern term and is used more frequently than subconsciousness, because subconsciousness is not really a part of awareness. We have actually forgotten it. Therefore, the word unconsciousness has been preferred, but there is no real difference between the two of them. Superconsciousness is the capacity to bring into awareness the level of consciousness lying outside the field of our immediate awareness, through a process of expanding awareness. Thus, the distinction between subconsciousness or unconsciousness and superconsciousness would be that subconsciousness can be brought into the field of awareness by the use of memory, whereas superconsciousness is brought into the field of awareness by the technique of expanding awareness, often referred to as meditation. Psychic energy force is the flow of currents of consciousness coming through the centers of the physical body from beyond the scope and domain of awareness. Psychic energy flow is that part of consciousness which operates through energy centers in the physical vehicle of the human body. It enables the experience to flow outwards as well as inwards. It enables an experience to be objective or subjective, or both. The physical body has a continuous flow of conscious energy, of consciousness traveling through all of its parts. This energy flows out from the body into our experiences lying within the domain of awareness. It flows out through sense perceptions. It then sustains these physical experiences and makes them a closed-circuit experience. This energy flows through the human body from fixed centers, which then function as the focal points for the flow of consciousness throughout our physicality. Having defined these terms, it now becomes clear that when we speak of levels of consciousness, we are not merely speaking of levels of awareness, but more fundamentally, we are speaking of levels of possible awareness, levels of potential awareness. A higher level of consciousness is qualitatively different from a higher level of awareness, and is not merely knowing more about the world around us. I am making this point because very often, students of awareness, and even practitioners of the art of meditation, make the mistake of regarding expansion of awareness as raising the level of consciousness. One can know a great deal about this world by increasing awareness, but it would not mean he has attained a higher level of consciousness. For example, suppose you are now aware of the room you are sitting in, but not aware of the rest of the world around you. You then decide to become aware of it by raising your level of consciousness through some particular technique or meditational practice. Actually, the level of consciousness you have attained remains the same as before. It is the same level of consciousness at which, initially, only the room was in awareness, but afterwards more of the world came into awareness. The rest of the world comes into awareness. This is all that has happened. This kind of expanding of one's awareness does not lead to any higher level of consciousness. One has simply expanded one's awareness at the same level of consciousness. Yet there are hundreds of students and practitioners of the art of meditation who go on thinking that since something more has come into their immediate field of awareness, they have, in fact, reached a higher level of consciousness. This, however, is not true. What then are these higher levels of consciousness? These higher levels of consciousness are related to our concepts at any given moment of what the self is. When we regard this physical body as our own self, then we are in the physical level of consciousness. All of the awareness that comes to us about the physical world, about anything that is happening on earth, in this physical universe, would constitute degrees of awareness within a single level of human consciousness, called the physical level of consciousness. This physical level of consciousness would represent our wakeful state. That is the state of consciousness you are now in, the state in which you are reading this book. This state is called the wakeful state of physical consciousness. This is considered one of the lowest levels of human consciousness. If, while in this state of consciousness, you happen to have a number of weird or bizarre experiences, it would not constitute a change in your level of consciousness. They would only be different experiences. They may be different degrees of awareness, but the level of consciousness would be the same, i.e., the physical wakeful level of consciousness. When you go to sleep and have a dream, then this dream state would constitute a still lower level of consciousness. Why lower? Why not different? Because in the dream state, you do not even use the physical body at all. You use a dream body, which is different, more ethereal, and which has been created only for the purpose of that particular dream. It is the dream body alone which senses and experiences the dream world. Therefore, the dream state is a lower level of consciousness. It is sustained by a dream body, by an imaginary body that you have created yourself through the mental process of dreaming. Another reason why we consider the dream level of consciousness to be a lower level of consciousness is because the dream level is always sandwiched between two wakeful states of consciousness. When we are awake, we can shut off this wakeful state of consciousness by going to sleep, by merely becoming unconscious of our physical body. When we relax and shut off the awareness of our physical body, we move into the dream state automatically. But it is an experience of a very short duration, followed by a much longer state of wakefulness. In a long wakeful state, a lifetime lasting many years between birth and death, we have many experiences of these short dream sequences, which are lower levels of consciousness. While we are asleep, we become unconscious of our body, and then a dream sequence starts. But when we wake up, we not only get back the consciousness of our body, we also realize that we were always in this world, even while asleep. This realization that we were in this world all the time makes the dream a lower level of consciousness. The knowledge that the body in which we have slept, the body which was lying on the bed before, and is still lying on the bed when we wake up, is all that is necessary to convince us that we were asleep. We don't have to open our eyes. We don't have to pinch ourselves to see if we are awake. All that is required is that we remember we went to sleep. The fact that we retain the continuity of the physical experience preceding the dream state proves that this wakeful state is more real. The immediate recall of our earlier state of physical wakeful consciousness upon awakening gives us certain proof that the dream state was only temporary and not real. And whenever we have an experience of a higher level of consciousness than this wakeful state, a similar change must also take place. It must be a kind of awakening into another kind of body, not this one, which we discover was existing throughout the duration of the wakeful experience, a body of which we had become temporarily unconscious. Then, and then alone, can we say that we have raised our level of consciousness to a higher level. When one examines the different experiences which have been regarded as superconscious experiences, one will find that many of these experiences are dreamlike. One feels that the person must be having some weird or fantastic dream and is wrongly calling it a higher level of consciousness. You may be a very wise and learned dreamer. You can be very knowledgeable in your dream, but a dreamer is a dreamer. You can dream of very beautiful sights and scenes of golden temples and sweet music, even of heaven, but no dream, however beautiful it may be, however great it may look, could ever be a higher level of consciousness, unless it results in a higher state of wakefulness. If it does not provide us with a body in which we have consciousness over a much longer period of time than in this physical body, it is not a higher level of consciousness. When you attain a real and truly higher level of consciousness, you will wake up into a different body which exists at that level of consciousness, which has been with you all the time. It was there even while you were having this physical experience. This, then, is a very easy test to apply. Many yogic states, which are misunderstood to be higher levels of consciousness, are merely different levels of awareness contained in the same level of consciousness, namely the wakeful level. Very often, these trances which yogis can attain are trances induced by a type of sleep in which the dream episode is regulated. But a dream is a dream, however regulated it may be. It is Maya, an illusion, the stuff of which dreams are made. These so-called inner experiences may be unusual and perhaps even beautiful, but they are mistakenly being called superconscious experiences, experiences of a higher level of consciousness. Most of them will be found not to be experiences of a higher level of consciousness, but a different awareness at the same level of consciousness. When a higher level of consciousness is experienced, you will have the sensation of waking up from a dream. You will recall in your own memory the point of time when you fell asleep into this lower wakeful state of consciousness. Unless this recall comes, you cannot be sure of having had an experience of a higher level of consciousness. When we wake up from a dream, we don't pinch ourselves. We don't ask questions and so on. No proof is required. Every morning you wake up, every night you go to sleep. But you never go about asking people if you are awake or still dreaming. You never do this. You are certain that you are awake. What makes you so certain? It is the recall, the memory of the fact that you went to sleep. If you did not remember that you had gone to sleep, you would never be sure that the intervening experience was a dream. In other words, to have a dream, you must first be awake. In the same way, in order to have a higher experience than this wakeful level of consciousness, there must be the recall of a higher level of consciousness from which we had earlier descended in a dreamlike way, into this present wakeful level of consciousness. When we rise back to that higher level of consciousness, the experience should be identical to that of waking up from a dream. We should be able to recall when we went into this lower state of physical wakeful consciousness. It is precisely this kind of proof that comes to those who are able to truly shift their level of consciousness one step above this physical level of consciousness, to what is called the astral level of consciousness. What happens when you shift the level of consciousness one step up to the astral level? When this is done, the reverse of what happens when you go into the dream state takes place. When you go into the dream state, you merely pick up a few of the perceptions from the wakeful state and rejumble them into a less coherent, less consistent framework of rules and laws, and we then have an experience within this framework. In the present state of wakeful consciousness, we experience everything in a regulated time frame. Todays follow yesterdays, and tomorrows follow todays. However, in a dream, this need not happen. Todays can be followed by yesterdays, and so on, and it will not bother you in a dream. Time gets all jumbled up, flows backwards, discontinuously. Yet never do such dream experiences seem unusual. While in that state of consciousness, it looks odd and even queer, but we still regard these events as real. In a dream, we often do some of the most bizarre things. We can defy all the laws of nature pertaining to the wakeful experience, yet they are accepted as natural and real while the dream lasts. In the wakeful state, we must follow the laws of gravity. However, in a dream, we may walk on the ceiling, and it would not bother us. We carry people from the wakeful state, and in our dream, we jumble up their relationships to us and to each other. Your wife may be your daughter in a dream, or your boss becomes your son, and so on. And yet these jumbled up roles seem quite real to us while we're in the dream state. It is only when we shift our consciousness to the higher wakeful state of consciousness do we see the higher reality on which the dream has been based. Similarly, this whole world is like a dream and has a higher reality than we can see at this level of physical, wakeful consciousness. Just look around you. Watch the people you are around. Look at their faces. Notice how they are moving about. Watch their gestures, and so on. A few are simply talking to themselves. No one is really listening to anyone. Their lips are just moving. They themselves don't even know what they are saying. Everyone seems to be in a dream, in a world of his own. That is why there is so much conflict and friction. Each person is living in his or her own dream world, so that whenever two persons come close, friction occurs sooner or later. It is bound to happen because their dreams cannot coincide, and everybody wants to impose his dream upon the other. This is the problem, because you cannot interpose your dream with another person. You cannot share it with others. You cannot force your husband or wife to see things your way. He or she is dreaming, and so are you. And dreaming is such a private phenomenon that you become completely unaware of the real world which surrounds you. This reality can be seen at the next higher level of consciousness, the astral level of consciousness.